Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the Booby Trap, which is episode 6 of season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video I cover the episode The Booby Trap. So the Booby Trap is the episode where the Enterprise is investigating an ancient derelict ship which Picard finds fascinating from an archaeological perspective. However, when the Enterprise goes to leave, they discover that they cannot leave and they are stuck in the same booby trap that killed the people of the ancient ship. Geordi LaForge enlists the help of a holographic program of one of the original designers of the holodeck, Leah Brahms, whom he also flirts with and gets along with romantically, and they try to discover a way to get out of the booby trap, and eventually they do discover a way that involves them turning absolutely everything off and someone piloting the Enterprise out on nothing but 2 thrusters. And Picard volunteers for the mission and he is successful and saves the Enterprise. So, it's funny. I was watching reviews for this episode, as I tend to do, because I actually like seeing other people's opinions, engaging where other people are at before I do my review, which is different when I do an episode that just came out. Usually I don't want any outside influence, but you know, that's new episodes that just came out. Episodes like this that have been floating around for decades, I've already been well influenced. But anyway, I found the reactions to this very different because I watched the review that hated this episode, or maybe hate is too strong of a word, but they didn't like it. They thought it was one of the poorer episodes of the season. And I think a couple reviews actually that were kind of down on this episode and didn't think it worked very well. And then there was another review that one was particularly negative, but then there was another review that they were pretty positive on it. That I was like, actually, this is really good. And then I watched this other review that loved it and thought it was one of the 30 best. Like put it in the top 30, possibly top 20 of the entire show. Now, my feelings on this episode has always been a little bit more in between those two positions, possibly closer to the position that didn't really like it that much. I never really saw that much point of the episode. Now, in the back of my mind, I've been waiting because I know that when we get to season 5 and 6 and 7, particularly 5, maybe 4 as well, actually, that there's the technobabble is going to start being a really, really huge thing, and that wasn't really that big of a thing in the first 2 seasons. So I've been trying to pay attention to see when the first real big technobabble episode is, and I think it's this one. I think because Geordi is like going all on and on about, and there were several times where I just zoned out and I wasn't even like, it was just zoned out from all this technobabble and I wasn't even paying attention to what was going on, so I had to like rewind the episode and listen to it again, and then I zoned out again because it's just a bunch of technobabble nonsense. There's a lot of it in this episode, and in fact when I did try to really pay close attention to it didn't make any sense. I think it is just a bunch of gibberish that someone in the script scribbled down. I don't know if Naren Shankar was the science advisor for this episode or during season 3. I'm not entirely sure when he came on as a science advisor. Maybe it was season 4, but I thought maybe he came on as a writer in season 4, so maybe he was a science advisor. I don't know when. But Naren Shankar in interviews had said before that when he was a science advisor on Next Generation, he realized that they don't want actual science. that Star Trek, that the Next Generation doesn't actually care about being scientifically accurate at all. which is, not a big shock. They just wanted consistency with their own science, which I do applaud them for. Because that's the thing with any fantasy show, is that any fantasy story, novel, or show, you have to... It's okay, you can make up whatever logic you want and make up whatever magic you want, but you need to set rules and be consistent with those rules. This is what pissed me off about people in Game of Thrones, when Game of Thrones later seasons would constantly break its own rules by having people teleport all over the fucking map. And then you got those assholes who would be like, oh, you're caring about such stuff in a fantasy show, it doesn't matter. It fucking does, because fantasy shows gotta create the rules and stand by the rules. If Aragorn in Lord of the Rings all of a sudden can shoot lasers out of his eyes and grow wings and fly, and that breaks the rules of magic of that world, then that's bullshit. That's bad writing. You have to be consistent. Being fantasy doesn't mean you can just do whatever the fuck you want. It means you can set rules, and you have to stand by those rules to do what you want. Anyway, and yeah, I think Star Trek is actually more of a sci-fi fantasy. I think it's actually, yeah. I was going to make a whole video about this, how Star Trek is really sci-fi fantasy and not just science fiction, because it's so fantastical. But anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked here. That is a topic for another time. Point is, I think this is the first real big Technobabble episode of the show. And it's only going to get worse from here, folks. We got to do the conducers and the vaser, and like this stuff that he was saying with Leah Brahms was just a bunch of nonsense. But anyway, why did he created the holodeck program with Leah Brahms and the Enterprise because he wanted to get into the guts of the engine. He's like, I want to be able to see the engine, because the engine's like actually going. He's like, I need to actually get inside of it, which of course he wouldn't be able to do without killing himself in the actual working engine. So the only way to do that is to see a replicant of the engine. And if you got the opinion of one of the system designers, she might be able to tell him stuff that he wasn't aware of. So that all makes perfect sense to me. But once he goes in the holodeck, he doesn't actually go inside the engine. You just see a version of the Enterprise that's being built in the background, and then he just looks at like charts on like the board or stuff. They have these big transparent glass boards, and he just reads information off of that. I humbly suggest that he could have done that from engineering. That the only difference is he got the, ambience aesthetic of having the Enterprise hanging in the background. That's like the only visual difference. Like, he really could have done what he could have done in engineering. And as far as asking the computer to give Leah Brahms the personality that she has to, go in her public files and her debate files and try to formulate a appropriate, close facsimile of Leah Brahms so he can converse with her. Tick-tock, Mr. Geordi, the fucking Enterprise. Everyone's gonna die on this ship in several hours, and you're wasting fucking time conversing with a hologram, giving her personality so she can flirt with you? Come on, man. Get your fucking priorities straight. I understand Picard's, sort of, when LaForge, introduces Leah Brahms to him, I understand his, not giving a shit. He was like, seriously? Dude, this is what you're doing with your time? This is what you're fucking doing with your time? We're all gonna die in, 20 minutes. But anyway, to be fair, she does help him come up with a solution, and her interacting with him with a like a person is more helpful than just a data sheet reading technical support like she was doing earlier. But On the other hand, LaForge does have an engineering team. And it's funny because when he was in engineering talking to the computer where Leah Brahms was like speaking and he was like talking back to her, I noticed that there was a random ensign in the background just working on the thing, and I made me wonder a couple of things. What is that ensign working on? Why can't that ensign help Geordi with, saving everyone from dying and and help him brainstorm ideas? And what does he think about Geordi flirting with the computer? Or maybe it was a she. What does she think about Geordi flirting with the computer? So anyway, yeah. So and it's funny because Picard even has the line where he says, "Oh, pass your congratulations to the team, to your team." And LaForge is like, "Oh, we're all smiles down here." And of course, he's in the holodeck and he's just talking about Leah Brahms, which at that stage didn't even have a personality yet. Does make me wonder, why didn't he actually, have a team? Why didn't he? We see this later in the episode Hollow Pursuits where they have an engineering problem and he actually works together with a fucking engineering team, which is what he should do. You know why he doesn't do it in this episode? Because none of his team are main characters. They would just have to have a bunch of faceless, nameless, ensigns or lieutenants that nobody's ever heard of, and that's not fun. I mean, he could have brainstormed with Wesley and Data. We see him do this in other episodes as well, and maybe you can have a couple of token ensigns in the background. It seems like this is something Data would be very useful for, helping. But instead, he's just fucking around in the bridge, and LaForge is fucking around in the holodeck, flirting with the hologram. And this would be come in handy if they actually kept, Ensign Gomez on the show, like I really, really think they should. But then again, she was supposed to be a love interest for Geordi, which would defeat the purpose of this episode. And you know what? I think that purpose should be defeated. I was saying before that they should have kept Ensign Gomez as a recurring love interest for Geordi, because that would be much better than what they do with him starting in this episode. And this is the main thing I do not like about this episode, is that they turn him into a geek who is terrible with women. And it's the geek cliche. And this is something that LeVar Burton had talked about even up to the present day when he was interviewed for Picard Season 3. He talked about how much he hated what the writers did to LaForge's character in Next Gen by making him awkward and geeky and terrible with women, because it was the tech nerd stereotype that he was very much against. And I have a feeling that's not what they were going for in the first season, but then they've completely changed his character around. And so by the time we get to season 3, in this episode they decide to make him terrible with women, and we get the opening scene with him on the holodeck that demonstrates that he's terrible with women. And this is where, oh, by the way, I got to talk about a Coco No-No, because I was very curious when LaForge offered his Data a Coco No-No. God, I'm trying to remember the name of his dates, because she actually appears in one other episode, Transfigurations, which I'll talk about when I get to that episode. But anyway, a Coco No-No, I was trying to look up to see if that was a real drink, and a lot of the online recipes that I saw mentioned Star Trek. In fact, most of them were like the food of Star Trek, and this drink didn't really work with Geordi LaForge to pick up women, but you still might want to try it, or something like that. But I think it is actually a real drink, even though maybe it's just more well known for Star Trek. I don't know. Like Memory Alpha has an article about it and says that it is a typically it's coconut milk and gin served in a hollowed half coconut shell. But I saw a recipe online that had nothing to do with Star Trek, didn't mention Star Trek, and it was a lot more complicated than just coconut milk and gin. It had like other stuff like pineapple juice and like almond shavings and stuff like that. Look complicated. But anyway, I don't know why I was fascinated by Coco No-Nos. I think by the name Coco No-No, it sounds like it's non-alcoholic, because usually they do the nada, like nada colada doesn't have alcohol in it. No made me think no alcohol, but anyway, it's really, really irrelevant. So what was I even talking about? I got distracted by the Coco No-No. Oh no, I was talking about the fact that they made Geordi into a failure with women. So yeah, they have him on the holodeck and illustrating that he's, failing with women because he's being friend zoned on the holodeck and he doesn't like it. But he's being really cheesy, he's being really awkward, and it's very obvious that his date's not having a good time, and that he's like having this, guy play the violin. He snaps his fingers and this hologram appears playing the violin. I was like, yeah, he's terrible like at this, but that's kind of the point that they wanted to portray, and I hate that. I think it's, and more importantly, LeVar Burton hated that. I think there was something they could have done better with this character. This is why I feel like they shouldn't have got rid of Sonia Gomez. They should have followed up on their plans to make her a recurring love interest for Geordi instead of doing this bullshit. And this is where the episode kind of loses me. This is where I really don't understand what this episode is getting at. Christy Henshaw, that's her name. That's the person that Geordi goes on a date with in the holodeck. Christy Henshaw. Anyway, so yeah, I don't get what this episode is trying to say, because usually, you get the classic TV, story format where at the start they show a guy being terrible on a date and having bad luck, to later meet the right woman who's actually good for him and he actually finds good luck. But in this case, the woman he meets is a hologram. And so I don't understand. It seems so. And then if in a TV episode like that, the point would be to show, oh, his luck has changed. Oh, look, he's actually found love. Isn't that good? Because at first he was, having a shit time with love and he doesn't know how to handle women, but he learned. He actually found the right woman for him. And so it's a feel-good story, and it makes sense. But the fact that they make it a hologram who is a holographic representation of a real person, it makes it really creepy, and it makes it like I don't get what they're trying to do. Like, it doesn't make that story work. The story fails. If it was a real person that he ended up falling in love with, like, for example, someone on his freaking engineering team, which is who he should have been working with, then yeah, I would get it. It would make sense. But it being a hologram who he just deletes at the end of the episode, I don't get it. It's like it doesn't serve any I don't know what this episode's trying to say. He's still a geek at the end of the day. His luck hasn't changed. He's still bad with women. He didn't meet the right woman because it's just a hologram that he deletes. Now, nothing wrong with, one of the officers getting it on with the hologram. I was perfectly okay with Riker doing it with Minuet and 110011 with 0000111100. I was okay with him doing it there, and I'm okay with Geordi doing it here. But it just doesn't work with. It doesn't work with. Oh, he has this failed date at the start of the episode. And then at the end of the episode, he's getting it on with a hologram. So what? What are you getting at? I don't know what you're getting at. It's just confusing and dumb and doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I want to talk more about Leah Brahms when we get to Galaxy's Child. And also, to be clear, this is another example which I talked about before, where when I first saw this episode, it was kind of a prequel for me, because I talked about how I saw season 4 before I saw any of the other seasons. So I had seen Galaxy's Child several times before seeing this episode. So I was like, oh, this is the origin story of Leah Brahms. So that gave me sort of a weird, different perspective, because she kind of made sense. But if I had saw this episode first before seeing Galaxy's Child, I would wonder what the point of Leah Brahms was. It doesn't seem to serve any purpose having this character. Why isn't he with his team? This whole storyline does not make any sense to me. Anyway, but yeah, I'll talk more about Leah Brahms when I get to Galaxy's Child. But I will say that Galaxy's Child, I think Geordi is often criticized for being very, very creepy, and some of the stuff he says is pretty disgusting, and I agree. And as I said, I'll cover that when I get to that episode. But in this episode, I actually don't think he's being too bad. And at the very least, in Galaxy's Child, when she was like saw this program and tuned in at the exact worst time, where at the end of the episode, Leah Brahms' hologram is saying, every time you touch the Enterprise, you're touching me, which that is fucking weird. And so with her seeing that, I could understand why she would get so goddamn upset. But then she says, oh, was it good for you? And in his defense, this episode made it very clear that they did not get it on. And he does say that, and it's true. But there's other issues with what he does say to her and how he's treating her in Galaxy's Child. But, as I said, I'll cover that when I get to Galaxy's Child. As for this episode, yeah, he's actually not that creepy. He's not that bad. In fact, if anything, it's the computer that is being creepy. It's the computer is the one that created this Leah Brahms that is full on hard out flirting with him and like just going up to him and like giving him back massages when they're supposed to be saving the ship, and talking about how every time she touches the Enterprise, he's really touching her. Like, he didn't come up with that shit. He didn't tell the computer to, hey, make her really sexy and come on to me. He just said, give her the personality that Leah Brahms actually has. And of course, we find out that this person, the computer says the personality is there's going to be like a 9.7% margin of error. But when we meet the real Leah Brahms, she's absolutely nothing like her. She's like, there's like a 90% margin of error there. Zero like how this she, but again, that's actually more of a problem with Galaxy's Child again. But still, yeah, I feel like the computer is making her really creepy. Like, why is it doing that? And also, for that matter, when Geordi is talking to just the audio version of Leah Brahms and is asked a question and says, show me, and then the computer automatically creates a hologram of Leah Brahms. And Geordi's like, did I ask you to create a holographic image of Leah Brahms? And the computer was like, you asked Leah Brahms to show you where it was. There's other ways that they could show, like they could like highlight the information on that little board in order to show him, or they could indicate it, or the computer can even say, oh, it's right there. That is very loose logic on him saying, show me, and means create a hologram. Like, yeah, there's something wrong with the computer. This is the same kind of logic they used in Elementary Dear Data to make a Moriarty sentient, which, as I talked about in my review for that episode, I don't buy. I don't buy that, and I don't buy this, but admittedly, this isn't as bad as the Moriarty thing. Like, I totally don't buy that that the computer would interpret. Like, the computer seems to have a very weird way of interpreting people, that it could just do all sorts of weird shit if it was consistent with this line of thinking. But anyway, so yeah, so a lot of that aspect of this episode is I don't know. As I said, it's not entirely creepy, and if I set aside the fact that Geordi should actually be working with his team, it's actually an interesting plot. It is pretty suspenseful, and it's pretty on edge, and I will admit the chemistry between Leah Brahms and Geordi works. Most of the time, not that shit she was saying about every time you're touching the Enterprise, you're touching me. But leaving that aside, like when they're trying to solve the issue, like I did like it, that scene when they were yelling at each other, when he was like, anyway, you're gonna make the Enterprise go, and we're gonna go with it. That was kind of funny. But anyway, so that worked. Picard, this episode is the first to touch up on Picard's love of archaeology, first mentioned in Contagion, and I do like that. So it's continuing a trait and establishing a trait of him having a interest in archaeology, which I love. The aspect of the old derrick ship was interesting. The whole I've already watched a lot of reviews where people made jokes about Picard saying it would be fun to climb inside the bottle. He's referring to climbing inside the ship in the bottle, but really this sounds like you're becoming an alcoholic climbing inside a bottle. But anyway, but yeah, that scene where he's like, didn't you ever build ships in the bottles when you were a boy? And Worf's like, I did not play with toys. And then Data's just like, I was never a boy. And then Chief O'Brien spoke up. It's like, oh, I did. I built ships in bottles. And Picard's like, thank you. And then Riker looks at him, and he's like, oh, I did. Seriously. Ships in bottles, great fun. I do find it hard to believe that anyone in the 24th century with all this advanced technology would waste time with ships in bottles. But wasn't Geordi building a ship in bottle in Elementary, Dear Data? Or I guess that wasn't in a bottle. It's just a model ship. But maybe he did. But Geordi wasn't there to mention it. Anyway, I guess now would be as good as time as any to get into the part of the episode I really did not like. And this is the part that bothers me the most about this episode, that I really annoys the hell out of me, and that's the ending, where Geordi comes up with a plan to fly the ship out of the debris field, away from the, what do they call it, collectors or whatever they were, disseminators or whatever they were that was trapping them there, and his plan is to shut everything off, do a burst of impulse power, but then turn everything off except for just two thrusters, and so that these disseminators, whatever they're called, have nothing to feed off of, and they would use mostly inertia to fly out, and they need a pilot with great skills to get them out of there. And Geordi LaForge says, I ran the simulations, so I could take the helm if you like, which makes the most sense in the world, thematically and practically, because LaForge, as he said, he ran all the simulations. He was the one working with the Enterprise the whole time, working on this plan. He's the one who developed the plan. He was the one who knows his engines. He knows the ship. He knows the feel of it. In fact, he used to freaking even be the pilot of the ship before, so he has piloting skills, he has engineering skills, he knows the specific circumstances better than anyone. So yes, he would make 100% be the best choice to fly this ship. So Picard, of course, says, no, fuck you, I want to do it. You know what? I kind of wish that the Enterprise exploded. I think it would have served Picard just right for being such a selfish dick. What a terrible captain to put the entire ship in danger by being a selfish, no, I want to be the one to fly it, even though he is less familiar with the situation. He's not as familiar with the engineering as LaForge is, did not run the test, and is not anywhere near as good as a pilot as Geordi LaForge. Why the fuck is he flying the goddamn ship? He's a bad captain. Selfish motherfucker wanting the glory instead of putting the person who is most qualified to fly the ship. But also what pisses me off is that's the in-universe reasons that piss me off. The outside of universe, the production reasons, the reason why Picard would be such a selfish prick is because the captain always has to save the day. And this pisses me off that when Star Trek does this, and I think there'll be other times in Star Trek, but this, to be fair, this is the time, I think the worst time, the token time, like the one that sticks out in my mind the most. If anyone ever talks about a time where the show has to always make the captain save the day, even when it doesn't make sense to do so, this episode is the first thing that comes to my mind as the worst example of that. We can't have Geordi LaForge fly, even though that would make the most fucking sense, because it has to be the captain that saves the day, which is bullshit. Total bullshit. It really, 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 really pisses me off. And every time I watch this scene, I'm just so irritated by the fact that they have fucking Picard flying the ship, which makes zero sense. Now, learning more and reading more and studying more about what was going on during season 3, I think I know why this happened. And at first, I was angry at the writers or the producers for saying, it has to be the captain that always saves the ship. But really, after learning Patrick Stewart's attitude during season 3, I think it was probably Patrick Stewart. Even if he didn't directly go to the writers and see the script and be like, hey, I should be the one to save the ship. He was apparently bugging the hell out of the producers in season 3 to the point of saying I might quit because he didn't think Picard was getting enough screen time or that Picard was being a big enough hero. He wanted Picard to be more involved in everything and more of the hero. One of the things he used to say to everyone, apparently he said this to Ronald D. Moore when he first met him, the first thing he said is, make sure you give Picard more fighting and fucking. He needs more fighting and fucking. And this eventually would result in Captain's Holiday. But yeah, that's the main thing. Picard needed more fighting and fucking. But I think that's relevant here too, even though he's not fighting or fucking, but he is being the hero that saves the day, even though it makes zero sense for him to do so. And I think a lot of that had to do with Patrick Stewart pressuring the studios. Now, I talked about this before, how I actually disagree that Picard was less involved in season 3. I heard some other people say, I could see that. No, I don't. I think Picard is very central to most of the episode. Even this one, he has a great deal. Even leaving out this bullshit scene where he flies the ship out of danger, he still is greatly involved. They develop his love of archaeology. He's like on Geordi's case. He has a lot to do in this episode. And almost most episodes he is very involved in, even if he's not the only character. He's usually, or even the main character, he's usually one of the most important ones. So, and I don't think that's changed. Like, when you look at the rest of Next Gen and you look at even the shows that came after, like Deep Space Nine and Voyager, like, Janeway and Sisko aren't more important than Picard. And in fact, it could be argued that they would feature less prominently than he does, even in season 3. So what I think it was, though, is because when this episode was made, none of that other stuff, the rest of TNG or DS9 and Voyager, none of that existed yet. What they're mainly going by was the original series, where Kirk was like super the main character and absolutely everyone always the one that saved the day. And so maybe that was it. Maybe because the name had Star Trek on it, he's like, why am I not being the Kirk? Why am I not being the main hero who always saves the day, who's involved in everything, who's the main character in every single episode? But the thing is I love that Next Gen and all the other shows that came after are ensemble shows. That is not always just about Kirk. It's not always just about the captain. It's about different characters doing different things. And but that didn't happen yet. And so I think at the moment Patrick Stewart is pissed off because he wanted to be more like Kirk. And I'm glad that they didn't make him more like Kirk. But the reason why he did stay is because the show got way better and more popular and by season 4, and mainly because of Best of Both Worlds really shot the show up into popularity, let alone that like he was able, after season 3 aired, they could see how successful season 3 was, how much better it was, how much popular the show was. And as I said, and by the time they get to season 4, because thanks to Best of Both Worlds, the show was like doing like very, very well. And so at this stage, Patrick Stewart is like, well, definitely not going to leave now. But during season 3, all during season 3, he was threatening to leave. So I think that's I think that's a major factor in why we have this BS bullshit scene with fucking Picard flying the ship when he has no business doing so. But it still pisses me off. It still really pisses me off. Now, another major thing I do have to talk about in this episode is the music. This is Ron Jones' score. And as I said, I talk about this a lot, composers a lot, because Ron Jones is very popular. I've heard a lot of reviewers and a lot of other people say that Ron Jones was the best composer of TNG and that, or of Star Trek, and that when he left, it was just what do they call it? Not cardboard music, but flat background, generic music, which is, I've talked about this many times before, a statement I very, 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 very strongly disagree with, which is why I'm going to keep bringing it up every point I get. In fact, I will do a video eventually about Dennis McCarthy, who I think is I don't know if I'd say he's a better composer, but I like his music for Star Trek better than Ron Jones. But, to be fair, I think Ron Jones, I don't hate Ron Jones' music. I just think it's overrated because people talk about it way too much, and I think Dennis McCarthy's was better. But his music, he did the score for Best of Both Worlds, was easily his best score. It's funny because I heard someone list off all of the episodes that he did, and they listed off Yesterday's Enterprise, which the music for Yesterday's Enterprise was amazing. Problem is he didn't do it. It was Dennis McCarthy. I will bring this up again when I talk about Yesterday's Enterprise. But anyway, oopsie doozle, it was actually showcasing how amazing Dennis McCarthy is. But anyway, I like his music in this episode. I think he got better in the third season, to be fair. In the first 2 seasons, I clearly liked Dennis McCarthy better. But I think his music did get better. I think his music is more sort of grandiose, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes I think it's too interfering, but other times not. I think, his music for this episode I'm a bit mixed on. Like, for the most part, I like it. Like, his main theme of that he plays when around the Booby Trap, the da-na-da-da-da-na music or whatever, is really good. But there's some, like, for example, there's a couple of moments that I cringed that I don't really like. Particularly the cringe moment, and I guess this has to do with Leah Brahms, is when Leah Brahms first appears. They play this music when the hologram first appears, and then they play this music once she gets personality and starts talking to Geordi. It's this really cheesy da 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 It sounds like really 80s soap opera-ish romantic music, and I hate it. I think it makes the Leah Brahms thing way fucking worse. And they play it several times throughout the Leah Brahms thing, and I hate that cue. I think it makes it way more cheesy, way more cringe. But to be fair, the rest of the music I actually do really like. In fact, I was going to bring this up and I forgot to mention it when I did my revisited for Who Watches the Watchers, because Ron Jones also did the music for that. And I also think that's actually a better score, actually. I like the Who Watches the Watchers music, and it's very unique music too. And they actually play a little bit of it in this episode. I'd never noticed that before, but I was paying attention to the music because I knew I was going to talk about it, and I heard at one point, I think when they were in Picard's Ready Room, they played a little bit of the Who Watches the Watchers music, the dun 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 dun, and that's good music. Like, I think the score for Who Watches the Watchers is even better than the score for this episode, and I don't think they ever played again though after this episode, but I could be wrong because I didn't even remember it was in this episode. But, yeah. But Ron Jones is clearly his best score, his best of both worlds. That's what everyone remembers. But I think, yeah, there's a couple, I praise his music in The Emissary. I thought it was pretty good in that. The Kalar episode, not the D.S. Stein one. But, yeah, I still prefer Dennis McCarthy overall. But I will say I did like the music for the most part. Other than that Leah Brahms cue, like, I really could have done without that. Anyway, I think that's all I really had to say about this episode. Other than why are Data and Wesley standing up to play chess? Like, don't they? Oh, I know Data wouldn't get tired, but surely Wesley would. Anyway, and he goes, uh-oh. And I guess I could talk about that Guinan scene where she, tells him that he was different and whatever, and I kind of like that. She's kind of giving him tough love in this situation. At least he's getting some kind of love. Anyway, yeah, I hate the fact what they did with Geordi. I really wish that they. And that's the one good thing about Aquiel, which we don't get into all the way in the 6th season. At least he actually gets lucky. At least he actually has a romance. But anyway, I would now like to thank all those that support me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me keep going, helps the channel continue, help me continue. I'm very humbled, very thankful for all those that support me. So I'll just give a quick shout out to Tatzin, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, new Patreon member, Tatzin, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Manijester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Miguelisio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Nealhouse. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we have a few patron comments for this episode. First comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, when I first saw this episode, granted as a rerun, I didn't even realize Leah Brahms was in Galaxy's Child, had this prequel, and once I knew, I had an appreciation beyond, oh, what a boring episode when I first saw it. I thought it was a bit clever, but in future viewings, I just cringed the way LaForge is behaving and really made nerds out there seem pitiful. I'd actually prefer how Barclay handled fantasy versus Geordi here. Given that, this was the first episode that clearly established Picard's love for archaeology, and actually it was quite interesting. And when Leah Brahms is seen as an avatar for the ship's computer, it actually worked. Still, Geordi's obsession with this avatar was definitely cringe-worthy, and while I have a new appreciation for Galaxy's Child and so much cringe, but I'll get to that when that episode is reviewed. 5 funguses out of 10. I do love a mushroom pasta, at least. Funganinus, is that it? Oh, maybe I'm pronouncing that wrong. I don't remember the reference to that in this episode. I remember the Coco No. But anyway, I don't know. As I said, I actually don't think this episode is that cringy as far as LaForge is concerned. I think the computer is being more creepy than LaForge is, and he didn't tell the computer to be that creepy, to be fair. He didn't say program Leah Brahms to come on to me hard out. So, yeah, I think Galaxy's Child, that's another issue. He is way worse in that episode. But I will, get to that when I get to that episode. Yeah, I don't think he's worse than Barkley. Honestly, I think Barkley's definitely worse with the whole goddess of empathy. How can you say that's not worse than this? That is definitely worse. But anyway, next comment is from Kyrie091, who says, "Booby Trap, more like booty crap. Okay, that one wasn't as good, but I can only work with what the titles they give me." Yeah, that one wasn't very good. I'm sorry. But that's okay. Thanks for trying. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, "Geordi falls in love with the hologram. Well, sort of. He did in fact save the Enterprise with the help of this hologram, Leah Brahms. Did he go over the top? Yes, he did. However, he didn't do anything so terrible. As we learn in Galaxy's Child, he didn't even go back to the program. He should have deleted the hologram or just remove all the new personal traits he added. My next comment is meant only for fun, as I like Geordi as a character and doesn't deserve the hate he gets. If Geordi was on DS9, would he have used the Holo Novels Vulcan Love Slave?" My rating is 9 failed dates out of 10. Yeah, that is a bit... I don't know if Geordi would check out the Vulcan Love Slave. I don't think he'd be into that. Anyway, poor Mr. LaForge. Again, I don't think he was that terrible in this episode. But anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, "Man, this is a divisive episode. I always forgot the Booby Trap storyline and remember Geordi being a hapless virgin. Let's spare a thought for Geordi LaForge. He's black, he's blind, and he can't score with women. Does anyone else feel the writers did his character a huge disservice by adding that last bit? Even in the late 1980s, that just seems wrong. If I was going on a date with someone, I'd like to be consulted about what holodeck program I'd prefer, and what the fuck is a Coco No. I would have beaten up the gypsy violinist. Well, I told you in this video what a Coco No is, so now you can go make yourself one, Brandon. It is gin and coconut milk mixed in a hollowed out half coconut shell. You're welcome. Anyway, I love Picard's joy after returning from the Perlmunin battlecruiser. Points to Susan Gibney for being able to play Leah Brahms with and without personality. But their relationship is cringy and makes me feel very uncomfortable. I'll be glad when Geordi gets his comeuppance. I wonder why the Enterprise crew blew up the permanently battlecruiser instead of the asteroids that were the actual booby trap. 4 Hungarian Rhapsodies out of 10. Yeah, the whole thing with the violinist when he was like, "Oh, knock it off," why didn't he instead say computer delete hologram? That seems like that would have actually gotten the job done. But anyway, well, I can answer the question of why they blew up the Perlmunin, I can't pronounce that, but why they blew up the battlecruiser was because so that no other ships would be interested to go there. Like, the only reason they went there was to investigate that ship. And they got trapped as soon as they did, so no other ships would bother going in that specific spot because there's no longer anything of interest there. That's how I saw it, anyway. And I think they did destroy those the things that were actually doing the booby trapping as well. There was multiple torpedoes sent out. But anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, "This is a decent episode. Again, not one of the strongest episodes of the season, but it still was good. Although I have to admit I was never a fan with Geordi falling in love with Leah Brahms. Although, to be fair, I have more issues with the season 4 episode than this one." Thank you, Ricky. The first one who said it. He's actually much worse in that episode than he is in this one. Anyway, where was I? Geordi interacting with holographic version of Leah was good and all, but I really don't like how Geordi can never get the girl. That's one of the things I didn't like on what they did with him. At the beginning of the episode, he takes the girl to the holodeck for the date, and then the date doesn't work. Come on, I don't think Geordi deserves to be alone. As for the plot itself, it was engaging and intense at times, so all in all, a decent episode, so my rating is a 7 out of 10. So thank you so much for your comments. So my rating for Booby Trap out of 10 is going to be a 6 good. Yeah, it was a decent episode. I liked the music. I liked that they explored Picard's love of archaeology. I think the tension worked really well for the episode. How the warnings that the computer would give out every once in a while about how the fatal exposure was very tense, and I think they utilized them at tense times, and the music worked in conjunction to make to really build the tension of the episode. And yeah, Geordi trying to figure out this mystery, even though it involved a lot of technobabble, was actually very interesting, and it was great getting a Geordi episode where he was exploring this, and the scene where the Enterprise had to fly its way out was very intense, and so gratifying, but only gets a 6 because some of the stuff with the Leah Brahms character just didn't work. For example, I don't get the point of showing Geordi having a failed date and then having him succeed with a hologram who the computer for some reason programs to be very creepy and say weird shit like every time you touch the Enterprise you touch me. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't get what this episode is trying to say with that storyline other than Geordi's pathetic nerd who can never score, which I don't like that message, and I think that's doing this character dirty, and I think LeVar Burton was very right to get upset over that and not like the way that the writers treated his character. And on top of that, we have one of the worst moments in the entire show, in my opinion, where they have to have Picard save the ship, even though it makes zero sense. He is the least qualified person to do that. He was actually coming off as a selfish, arrogant prick by putting 1,000 people on board the Enterprise, putting all their lives at grave risk just because he wants to be, selfish and arrogant and wants to fly the ship himself instead of letting the most qualified person do it. Plus, thematically, it would have made more sense for Geordi LaForge, since this is a Geordi LaForge episode. It would have made more sense for Geordi LaForge to fucking fly. I don't know this, but I get the strong sense it was originally written as LaForge flying the ship, but then some dickhead, maybe under pressure from Patrick Stewart, is like, oh, make the captain do it. Even though it makes no sense. It's a stupid note if anyone gave it. Anyway, so, and that moment stands out to me as like the worst moment in the entire show. Of the captain has to save the day, even if it doesn't make any fucking sense. So, for those reasons, I can't give it any higher than a 6, but like the music and the suspense and the intrigue of it is enough to give it at least a positive rating. So yeah, as I said, I'm not as low on this episode as I've heard some people be, but then other people absolutely loved it. So I guess Brandon was totally right. This is a divisive episode, and I didn't realize this until today when I watched all of these reviews, but there you go. But my rating's kind of down the middle, a 6. So that is it for my review of Booby Trap. Thank you so much for checking this video out, and be sure to check out my channel as I continue down the rabbit hole of Season 3 of Next Generation. So coming up next on my channel, this Saturday we'll be releasing my review for the Marvel Disney Plus show Echo. And then on Monday, back with TNG with another new fresh review for The Enemy, another LaForge episode. And then Wednesday, back with another TNG review for The Price. And then Thursday, another new TNG review with The Vengeance Factor. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out for that, and check out my channel as I cover many more Star Trek videos and many more videos from many shows. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.